Welcome, everyone, to the second PxP conference, a conference for and by patients, all about patient engagement in research. And I am a member of the International Steering Committee that has completely designed and developed all aspects of this conference. My name is Ray Martins, and I am from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and I will be your MC for today. I would like to take a moment to start off with a land acknowledgement. Today, I am joining you from the heart of Southern Alberta, for which I'd like to take an opportunity to acknowledge and pay tribute to the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7, which include the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda. And the city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. We acknowledge that we are joined today by people from across the globe and on land that has been stewarded by Indigenous peoples for thousands of years. PxP is an international virtual conference, and some of our attendees may not be familiar with this practice of land acknowledgement. We encourage you to spend some time learning about and reflecting on what a land acknowledgement means. Please take the time to share your own land acknowledgement in the chat if you would like to do so. But right now, I'd like to speak a few words about words. We realize in some places, different words are used. Patient, patient partner, patient research partner, consumer, patient and public member, patient engagement, consumer involvement, patient and public involvement. But we all know that we are all here to globally talk about how people with different types of lived and living experience are working with researchers as partners in research. And I have a few housekeeping notes for you today. We will have 3 sessions around the theme of valuing your voice as a patient partner, and a new type of session this year to close out the day, which is an Ask Me Anything session about patient engagement in research. There will be a 30-minute break between sessions and a 15-minute break before the Ask Me Anything session. First session, embracing the lived experience part of your identity. The second session, raising the bar and sharing the power. Third session, taking care as a patient partner. And the final session will be the Ask Me Anything session. Use the Q&A function of Zoom to ask questions of the session speakers. We'll try to get as many questions answered as possible. Please use the chat function to share a little bit about yourself, share any resources you like, that you'd like people to know about. We will be capturing all thoughts and resources and shared in the Zoom chat in an anonymized summary for each session. Closed captioning is available to viewers through Zoom. Turn this on by selecting the CC button at the bottom of your screen as a viewer. You can then select the language that you prefer for these captions. We won't spend too much time introducing speakers. You can find the speaker biographies for each session in the resource tab, also available as HTML, PDF, as well as a digital flipbook on our website. We would like to acknowledge Mary Bocage, who had agreed to be a part of this year's steering committee and who passed away earlier on this year. We would also like to acknowledge all patient partners who move in and out of the patient engagement and research space, whether they are still with us or not. Our social media hashtag is PxP24. Feel free to share anything you wish on social media, and please know that we are recording the first 3 sessions each day, and they will be posted on the PxP website after the conference, so people can watch them if you can join. While the conference has been designed for patients and by patient partners, of course, we welcome others who have joined us. We also want to let you know that we took your feedback from PxP 23 in consideration, and we have done our best to diversify the steering committee members and all of our conference speakers, as well as taking into account some of the topics you said you wanted to learn more about. We will do some of the same feedback you provide for us this year. This conference and community are all about you. Thanks to the conference's supporters, the Canadian Institutes of Health Research's Institute of Musculoskeletal Health and Arthritis. And now I'd like to take an opportunity to pass things over to David Gilbert, who will be hosting today's first session. David, on to you.
Thank you. What a pleasure. And apart from suffering chronic anxiety, I'm particularly nervous at the moment, and to be kicking things off is, yeah, both a pleasure and a bit of a pain, but I'm sure I'll get over the pain quite quickly. We've got Libby and Angie here. We are lacking Oluwafemi, who is trying to join us, so there should be a third panelist with us. But we, as Reyes said, we're not going to be stuck for intros. We're going to go straight into the action, as it were. So how this will work is we've got 3 sets of questions for everyone, and I'm going to be cheeky and be a questioner and answerer. So the first question is going to be about what are the opportunities that you've embraced from having a lived experience. The second one will be a theoretical question: is what does this phrase mean? What does it mean to embrace one's lived experience? And the third one will be about impact. So we're going to go round in that way. Do post questions on the Q&A sheet. I'm not going to be able to see questions in the chat. I will be able to see questions in the Q&A tab. So I'm relying on other people to look after the chat for us. So without further ado, I'm going to just get the exact question up on my screen, which is frozen as it would when you're nervous. So the first question, and I'll ask Libby this first. What opportunities have emerged from embracing your lived experience? And you've got 2 or 3 minutes.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. So I had to stop working in 2016 due to yo-yoing in and out of hospital. I'm sure a lot of the patient partners joining us today will have that familiarity of ping-ponging back and forth into hospital. I had undiagnosed adrenal insufficiency at the time, plus multiple other chronic health issues. By chance, a friend let me know that there was a coffee morning to discuss a research project called the STAR Project, looking at family planning with autoimmune conditions. I had no idea at the time what service user involvement looked like, nor had I come across that phrase and what it would lead me on to in the future. Since then, I have got heavily involved in lots of different projects. So over time, my confidence has grown, and that has led me to feel, I guess, confident enough to take on many different roles. So some of the opportunities I now have, I co-lead the public involvement and engagement at Health and Care Research Wales Evidence Centre. I'm on the management committee of the newly launched Rare Disease Research Network with CamRare. I am an ambassador for the Love Your Period campaign, and more recently I was gratefully awarded an honorary research associate title from the Division of Population Medicine at the School of Medicine at Cardiff University. I was sort of blown away by that as an opportunity because it's opened lots of doors, and tomorrow I'm going to be co-presenting a lecture to third-year medical students on shared decision making, which is a passion of mine.
So Libby, I'm going to totally interrupt you, as I've been
Sorry,
told.
I can ramble for hours.
I've been told not to interrupt, but I'm really fascinated. How did that opportunity come about, the visiting professorship? If you can just summarize that. Sounds
the
amazing.
honorary research title came about from all of my volunteering. So one of the things I've been doing is a co-produced PhD called the Familiar Study, which led on from the STAR study. And I've been involved now for over 6 years, and that, alongside my evidence centre work and a few other things I've been up to, led to Dr. Nitsa Williams putting me forward for the honorary research title. So I'm really grateful because it's opened doors that I've now got access to the university library, all of these things that you don't get automatically as a patient partner. So it's really nice to be a part of the Division of Population Medicine now.
It's the
It means I can
support
go
as well
in.
as it's the support as well as
Yeah,
the opportunity, isn't
yeah.
it?
It opens up more support networks. More recently, I've just joined the EDI committee at the Population Medicine,
EDI?
Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Sorry, that's my I'm
No,
a great
sorry.
one for picking up on acronyms. So I think we all do it sadly. So yeah, no,
And did I,
it's great to have my sort of first foray tomorrow into the world of getting involved with the students, and it's something I'm hoping will become more and more involved in, because I think that's where public involvement can really change things. And speaking just recently, I was in hospital a few weeks ago and talking to one of the medical students. They were really interested to hear that I was getting involved because they would love to have more patient involvement when they're learning.
yeah,
So yeah,
feels
patient
like
partners are really important.
those worlds between research and education are permeable to some extent. I'm gonna,
Yeah,
to some extent, I'm gonna have to interrupt you now and move on. But
yeah, of course.
if I've chopped off any bits of what you wanted to talk about, you can hit me around the head later.
That's fine. Thanks, David.
Angie, what about yourself and the opportunities coming from your embracing lived experience?
Yeah, thanks, David. First, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of where I am, which is the Darug and Gundungurra peoples, also known as Blue Mountains, Australia. So it's 2 a.m. here for me. So it's a bit of a bit of an experiment for me to see if my brain will work at this hour. For me, I think embracing my lived experience really gave me purpose. It gave me a passion and drive that I didn't have before. So I was in my early 20s when I had started experiencing chronic pain. And at the time I was working as an event manager in the entertainment industry. But I became really passionate about wanting to understand more about pain, wanting to think about how can we improve the care that people with pain are receiving. And so I went on to go to uni for the first time in my 30s, studying neuroscience. I've had the opportunity to work with some pretty amazing people in the pain care space, people with lived experience, researchers, clinicians. And I've started an initiative called Our Recovery, which is a social support and learning program for people with chronic pain. It was something that started originally in the community by people with lived experience and some allies. And it's now a not-for-profit organisation, but I was also led a team of researchers and clinicians and people with lived experience in a successful grant of federal funding, which is amazing. So I'm now leading a research project as a consumer researcher that's co-designing and evaluating the Our Recovery program. And so it's sort of been this sort of progression for me, and I can sort of start to see now the next phase of opportunities opening up, which is around how can we embed consumer or lived experience leadership within the research systems. And I'm starting to, draw on my lived experience of being someone in the community, starting a research project, and how can we support other people to do that, so we can really nurture those ideas and insights that can only come from people with lived experience.
Thanks a lot, Angie. And we've already got questions which we'll come back to on the perennials, the stigma of coming forward with your lived experience and the compensation and the money and all that. So if we've got a time, we'll definitely come back to that. But it's great to see you, Oluwafemi. Glad you could be here. Your internet was a bit sticky, so it looks like you need to breathe. Yeah. And can I ask, are you ready to answer the same question, which is what opportunities have presented themselves as a result of embracing your lived experience?
Well, okay. I didn't start accepting myself initially. I'd gone through life initially living in self-denial for a while, but then I just decided, okay, I could live beyond the stigmatization. And so I decided that, okay, let me be me. And since then, it has been from one research project to another research project to another research project. It has also been from it has been an opportunity to advocate. One thing I've learned about advocacy is you don't have, you are like an example for other people. When people see you and what you've been through, you give them like a hope for them. When they hear your own experiences, they are able to use you as something of an inspiration or motivation, especially in the dark times. One main thing that I would forever appreciate is the opportunity for me to.
Oh, I know the internet connection was getting worse and worse. Oluwafemi promised it would get better and better, being cloudy where she was, and she thought it'd be sunny, but it looks like it's rained on her. In the meantime, I think we can just say she was answering such stuff about stigma. And I was also noticing, Libby, you talked about period pain is one of the things that you were talking about. Certainly in mental health, the stigma of having mental health problems is extreme. And I just wonder whether we can think about that a little bit as we move on. But the opportunities for me was to become a patient director, which was at the end of a sort of 30, 40 years. And the role of a patient director is the first of its kind in the country, in the NHS, and was an executive, not a non-executive trustee level post. Really hard. And I've noted that each of us have already said that the opportunities that we've been provided with are sort of as part of a career that seems to have slowly progressed. And I just wonder whether we could just spend just a moment before coming on to what does it mean, was getting into this game in the first place is quite difficult. And I just wondered whether you'd got any advice on how for instance, in illegal substance use or in anything like that, any thoughts about stigma? I know it's thrown you off track because we've gone off choreography.
Yeah, I think stigma is definitely an ongoing concern. I definitely feel more comfortable talking about my physical health more than my mental health. The physical health has definitely impacted my mental health over the years. And I think the more I grow in confidence, the more I put the stigma worries to one side and don't feel so worried about sharing my women's health issues, for example. And
how do you get the comfort? How do you get the confidence? That's the last time I'm going to interrupt you. I promise you.
No, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I think I'm very grateful to have great colleagues in supporting the support network, I guess, is important for confidence.
Indeed.
I was very grateful to have some great advice in how to speak today from a colleague yesterday in a Teams meeting. And I think having the right people around you championing you is really important, because you do grow, and having that support is really important, whether that's, you know, family support, friendship support, or whether it is colleagues that you pick up along the way. I think you can get that confidence from other people, and eventually it grows within inside you. I think it's not something, you know, I ever thought I'd be doing. I had no idea, like even 8 years ago, that I would be sat here today talking about how my career changed like 360 degrees. I used to work in commercial horticulture, so this is a different life for me. But back then I didn't know I'd become a disabled woman with 20 multiple, you know, I've got 20 chronic health issues now. The list is getting longer day by day. The comorbidities build up because of the nature of chronic health issues. It's sort of buy one autoimmune condition and get 5 free, as it were. And sadly, that is the nature of being so unwell. But I'll stop talking and let Angie answer as well. I'm aware we've got a limited time today.
Thanks, Libby. That was great. I think the support and the finding people who'll lift you up, as somebody's put it. Angie.
Yeah, I think for me, my professional career and my lived experience sort of paralleled. I did a lot of training around how to involve other people with lived experience into the work that I was doing at the same time as bringing my lived experience in. Some of the stuff that I really got from that was around boundaries. And thinking about bringing your lived experience into spaces that you feel comfortable to. I think that there are still spaces where sadly, the lived experience is stigmatized. And so I just tend to just try and flesh out, you know, is this a space where people really value the insights that come from this, and that I can feel like I can fully show up in these spaces? And it's not always successful, you know, that's a bit of a process. I think the other thing is around, you know, just being mindful around what your footprint is as well. I think we're in this digital age now as well. So how much do you want that ongoing personal parts of yourself out there on the internet? And I think we're all really different. That's a really personal thing. And so it's about, I think, for each of us thinking about, you know, definitely for me thinking about what is it that makes me most comfortable? What am I willing to share?
That needs a lot of clarity about who you are, and as you say, it's a process, and it's a messy one, isn't it? And how do you know when you walk into the room whether it's safe to say something or not? It's a really difficult process. But thanks, Angie. I'll get back to the script, shall I? Which is going on to the second question. So this phrase, lived experience, I mean, I have to say sometimes I don't know what a dead experience is, but this phrase, lived experience, which is coming into being, what does it mean to you to embrace your own lived experience? I'll go to Libby.
Thanks, David. I gave this one a lot of thought over the last few weeks while we've been preparing for today. I think for me, coming to terms with multiple chronic health issues, the changes to your life, from the effect that has on your work, your relationships, managing hospital appointments, it can all be a big change when you haven't had that impact in your life before. Embracing the lived experience, in my opinion, is turning those huge feelings and occasions into something positive. I'm really grateful to have found my new niche and something that I can do around all of my hospital appointments. I've only been home a week. I've been in hospital for 5 days with COVID and adrenal crisis. Most jobs I wouldn't be able to go back to so quickly. I'm still napping long hours every day at the moment, recovering. But this kind of work enables me to be able to participate in life, being flexible. And I think I use the term hashtag full-time patient because my life is full-time patient life now. I have so many different consultants that I spend some weeks every day at the hospital visiting different departments. But being able to embrace my lived experience gives me that opportunity to turn the bad days into good days. And I really appreciate that opportunity. And it may not work for everyone. I think the important thing about lived experience is my lived experience is my lived experience, and someone else with the exact same medical history would still have a different lived experience to myself, because they will meet different medical doctors, they'll have a different support network. So I think it's really important that we all value everyone's lived experience in the room, and not, the more lived experience we can have in a room, the better, and making sure that everyone is heard at the table.
Thanks, Libby. Welcome back, Oluwafemi. I'm going to go to Angie first, and I recognise you're not on video, and we're on the second question. Angie.
Yeah, I think for me, this is about integrating the insights and the strength and the power that comes through living through something. And particularly for me, it's been around and bringing that into the professional space to how can I use these insights to help shape how we do healthcare research and service design. I think it's been quite a work in progress. It continues to be a work in progress for me, embracing my own lived experience. When I was at the height of my sickness, I kept it to myself. I didn't share with my family and friends. It did motivate me to change my career to go into health, but it was quite a process to be able to really own that experience. And I think for me that sort of progressed into, I was working in health for about 9 years before I started working in lived experience identified roles. And now all of the work that I do is lived experience identified. And I think that may have been part of a progression, a personal progression, embracing my lived experience, but it may also be that there are now lived experience roles. There are a lot more opportunities available for people, and there's a lot more, seems to be a growing interest in the value of lived experience insight. And I think, through embracing my own lived experience, I really know the value. Similar to what Libby was saying, really know the value of lived experience insights. And I see my role now as also how can I invite other lived experience people into this space.
Thanks, Angie. Oluwafemi, how about you? What does it mean to embrace your own lived experience?
Okay, thank you, David. So, embracing my lived experience to me means to accept myself holistically for who I am and what I stand for. And this includes accepting the things I can't change, like living with sickle cell disease. It means for me that I stop living in self-denial. And as you said in one of our discussions, bringing jewels out of the caves of suffering. It means standing up for myself and others like me, sharing my experience to benefit others despite my pain, the mockery, the stigmatization in this part of the world. And it means to understand my body more and to manage sickle cell disease as much as I can. That's what it means to me.
Thank you, and so succinct and so clear. May I just build on it for what I believe is that there are two tributaries that run through my work, two rivers. One is, as you say, the jewels of wisdom and insight that come from the caves of suffering. We know vulnerability, we know power, we know what good and bad looks like, we know we have a vision, we understand power, we understand what it means to receive an uncertain diagnosis. And all those things, if reframed, are actually leadership qualities. It's what clinicians and managers go to expensive courses for, those courses that we're not able to access. But there's a second level of things that come into play, as somebody has said, is there are special skills. But we were somebody before we got ill. We have what somebody called frozen assets, Edgar Kahn, co-production specialist. You know, I was a writer and an activist before I fell ill. So if one reframes the lived experience as inherent qualities, leadership qualities, and if one gets the confidence to thaw out those frozen assets, then what one needs are the opportunities to fly. And those opportunities are few and far between. I'd say they're more in research than in service design and delivery, but that's another thing. And somebody has asked about language. We've got about 50 different questions running through the Q&A, well, 10, but it feels like 50 to the chair with 15 minutes to go. And I'd just like to say one thing about language. The word that I'm using increasingly these days is experiential, that we are experiential practitioners or experiential leaders, that the experiential nature of what we bring is equivalent and no less and no more than clinical expertise, and that in the future maybe experiential practice or experiential leadership might be the words, because lived experience leadership is tricky. Patient is a contested term. And I just wonder whether we're on the way to building an experiential practitioner workforce. Let's go on to the last question. And I'm afraid that a lot of those Q&A questions we're not going to be able to get to. But certainly on compensation and money, if somebody wants to give me a call, I'll be happy to talk about what's happening in the UK. So the last question is, what are the impacts? What are the benefits? What are the advantages of embracing your lived experience? And I'm sure there are many. So we'll have to summarize again, and each of you could be given 20 minutes, half an hour to yourself. And I'm sorry it's so short. Libby, I'll come to you first again, and then Angie, and then Oluwafemi again.
Thanks, David. So the advantages are numerous, and I'm always finding new ones that I hadn't identified as an advantage. I've already alluded to the big one, the confidence and my self-esteem and generally feeling less depressed. When I had to stop working in 2016, I became very depressed. I didn't see what the future held other than yo-yoing in and out of hospital, being very unwell, bedbound with my ME and chronic fatigue syndrome. For one person, it is not easy managing 20 different chronic health issues all at the same time. Some of them are classed as rare diseases, so there's even less support and help out there for those. If I could travel back in time and tell myself that life would turn out differently to what I had envisaged, but still have a purpose, that would be great. The impact that it's hard to capture impact, and it's something that I'm working on at the moment with the Evidence Centre, is capturing the impact of lived experience and public involvement. But one that I did think of was that through my Instagram blog, I actually helped someone get diagnosed with Addison's disease. They'd been unwell for quite a while. The medics had missed it like they did with myself. But luckily a family member had seen me blogging on Instagram about my health issues and actually said to their family member, actually, why don't you suggest this? And it was actually Addison's that they had. So raising awareness is something that we can all do with our lived experience. And I guess the only other thing is breaking down barriers is an impact I've had. I keep breaking down barriers wherever I go as much as I can to help other people get involved with public involvement and engagement. one of the conferences I tried to attend needed an academic email address. A lot of us don't have academic email addresses. I do now, thanks to my honorary title. It's something I emailed the conference about to raise that with them, that if they wanted public members to attend, that they shouldn't be requiring an academic email address to attend. So I think, to summarise, there are lots of advantages and benefits to being involved. There's lots of disadvantages as well. And I wanted just to put that, not as a final note, because that's not really my outlook on things. I always try and be positive, but it is just to say that there are also disadvantages. And like Angie said, you have to share what you're comfortable with. Don't feel pressured into sharing anything you're not feeling comfortable with. You know, it's your lived experience. You get to choose what you bring to the table. And if a researcher makes you feel comfortable, you're going to share more. So it's definitely, from a co-production point of view, needs to be a two-way street to make you feel comfortable at the table to get the most out of your patient partners.
Thanks, Libby. We could talk for hours about the emotional labour of this work and the
I definitely could.
Thanks, Angie. Advantages mostly.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the, when I think about impact, one of the driving principles is a systems thinking principle that talks about that the system replicates itself across levels and areas of the system. So I sort of conceptualize this as, if I'm working in research and we are centering the person with lived experience in how we do research or how we do service design, then we're more likely to create healthcare systems that are person-centred. And I think we need to really be coming back to this. How do we make systems more person-centred, which I don't think we can do if we're not centering the person in all parts of the process. So that's really what I hope my impact is, and very difficult to measure, but I hold that. On a personal level, I think it's been really important for me to be able to embrace all the parts of me and bring my whole self into the work that I do. And also that this work is quite flexible. I found this work quite flexible. I can work from home. I can, have flexibility in how I engage. And so that's been, a real benefit for me as well. And I think I would hope, and I feel like I see this in some of the teams that I work with, as I turn up as a lived experience person and I hold space for that part of my identity, bringing my full self into my work, that I hope that gives permission to my teammates to do the same, whether we're holding lived experience roles or we're holding, more traditional academic roles. We're all human, and I think, personally think that workplaces could benefit from allowing us just to be a little more human.
Exactly. Permission to be vulnerable. Wonderful. Angie, thanks so much. Oluwafemi, the advantages and benefits and impacts of embracing your lived experience.
So far, the moment I stopped living in self-denial, sickle cell disease advocacy research gave me the opportunity to meet more people that are more knowledgeable than I am, both in research and then in patient lives. I met several people, younger, older, and having worse complications like myself. And it was when I started this that I learned that my disease had several variants. My variant is different from other people's variants. I got a better understanding. I was able to engage more in counseling and support, and I've been able to understand the perspective of different people as regards not just sickle cell, but diseases generally. So It has exposed me to different areas, and I've also, even in my network, I've been able to refer several of my folks to other research works, and that has been very, very encouraging for them and for myself. The experience is also helping me in my doctoral studies. I understand more about sickle cell from the perspective of the patient. You know, it's one thing to know to understand when your doctor speaks to you, but it's another thing when the patients themselves tell you exactly this is how everything is. So it's exposed me to a lot of things, and sometimes, not all the times, sometimes when I participate in research, I get paid for it. So that has been some of the advantages.
That's great. Sometimes you stress sometimes.
Yeah.
And in terms of the benefits for me, one of the main benefits was when I was patient direct and having some power in the system. We didn't have chairs with arms in the waiting rooms for people with musculoskeletal problems, and there was no budget for chairs with arms. And the only way we got chairs with arms was I managed to grab some of the budget from the operational manager at the facility that had the chairs with no arms. And we were able to avoid going to IKEA with a van. And instead, we managed to get some proper armed chairs. And that wouldn't have happened without the power I had at that particular point. And that's a bit of a joke, but I think those small things that disappear if one has the power to affect decision making at an early stage is all to the good. And I think the benefits we've seen from the three of you span quite macro things, system level changes through to personal advantages. And if we can develop a common framework for looking at the impact, I think that would help us quite a lot. And I'm sure there are people who have done that work. And I've done a little bit of that work a long time ago. But I think getting the benefits, our ducks in a row around the benefits and the impact of this work at different levels would be so advantageous. So we've got, funnily enough, we've got 10 or 15 minutes. An interesting question coming in. I know I'm being very picky with some of these, and I'm going to come back to this. But so here's what I'm going to do. We've got about 15 minutes, and I'm going to take two questions. One is the one we prepared earlier, which is any advice you've got for somebody starting off, because it feels like a long time ago, doesn't it, when we first started on this journey and how difficult that was. So we're going to start with that one, and then we're going to go back to a question that's just come in about the similarities and difference of engagement in research and service design, which is one that particularly fascinates me because I'm more in the latter than the former. Perhaps we could chat about that. So any advice to the beginner? We'll go around the same way if you don't mind, Libby.
Yeah, so I think my first thing is just give it a try. When I think back to toddling along to the coffee morning that I attended, I had no idea what that would lead to. Don't be afraid to reach out. There's lots of ways in. In the UK, there's always sort of public involvement seminars going on with the NIHR, inviting the public to join an online session. Sign up to all the emails, Health and Care Research Wales bulletins, really useful to get different opportunities out there. And I guess networking is a big thing. I found it really useful, I guess, going back to that support network of building a LinkedIn profile, communicating with other patient partners on Twitter, I know we were saying, you know, that Twitter can be a good thing and a bad thing, and social media is like that for everyone. But from my perspective, I've found my Instagram, blog and Twitter, it really helps me. And especially when I'm isolated in hospital, it's my link to the outside world. So I know social media is not for everyone, but I have found it a benefit, and that is a way to network and meet other patient partners and learn from other patient partners. I'm always learning and I'm always interested to meet people, and I'm happy to chat. So if there's anyone out there that's new and has joined us for the first time this year at PxP, then don't feel afraid to drop me a direct message on Twitter.
You'll get hundreds.
I might regret that later.
We still and are we still allowed to call Twitter Twitter? I hope so.
I'm never going to not call it Twitter, I'm afraid.
No, me
Elon
neither.
can send me a grumpy email if he wants, but it's always Twitter.
Indeed. Angie, advice to a newbie.
Yeah, I've found that this work is really relational. The things around developing trust and communication, transparency have been, when those qualities are there, the work has been the most rich for me. So it's around working with people where you have that connection with. So chat, you know, I'd recommend just starting to speak to people, reaching out. I'm not much of a social media person myself, but I do use LinkedIn a little bit, but I connect with somebody and I'll ask them, is there anyone who you think I should connect with, and seek for people to sort of connect me through to their networks. And I've found building a support network of people with lived experience that are doing this work really valuable. People who understand what it's like to show up in spaces like this, so that we can, you know, share the wins and share the challenges, and also learn from each other, because I feel like it's very much, definitely in the pain care space in Australia, it's a very much an emerging space, and everybody in the team are learning as we're going, and that, so it can be a bit of a bumpy ride sometimes.
Thanks, Angie. Oluwafemi, how about you? Advice to a newcomer.
Okay, for me, let me go back to the first time I started. I was at a meeting, and I had the opportunity to meet a lot of people like myself, and I saw people with worse complications than mine. Some were better off, some had worse complications, and I got very teary-eyed, and I made a vow to myself that whatever I have to do to help myself and others, I would. So being a patient partner, I would advise that you see yourself as whatever knowledge you can pass across, it's helping someone. You are touching the life of someone as you're sharing your experience, as you are participating in that research. You are helping, you might not know, but you're touching someone. It might be just one paragraph you share that is going to help someone, set someone free from whatever they are going through. So just go for it, and no holds barred.
What a beautiful answer, to be able to help somebody else. And I think that the looking after yourself, so for me would be the advice to a newcomer is show us the money. Somebody asked about compensation and remuneration. Just say no. Don't be seduced. If you're being asked to something big and something where they need you as much as you need them, and ask about how they're going to actually value your experience, because this can be very exposing. So I'm a great advocate for breaking the current National Institute of Health Research maximum payment of £150 a day. I think it's too little. And I think we need a different sort of set of international standards on remuneration. And if anyone's working on that, I'd be happy to help. But at the moment, what started off as a good idea to pay people £150 and value them, that work is so totally out of date for those of us who are trying, dare I say it, to make a living as consultants out in the real world. So I think we've got, coming back to research versus service design. Does anyone want to tackle that one? We've got 5 or 6 minutes to think about, are there similarities and differences around engagement and research and service design? That's a really, really good question and merits a conference all on its own. Anyone want to jump in on that one? Angie looks like you too.
Yeah, I think I would jump in and as much as say that whether it's happening in the research space or clinical services or community services, there's benefit in doing a collaborative approach where you have the 3 arms of, you know, drawing on the clinical evidence, drawing on the health services. So you have the researchers, the clinicians, and of course the people with lived experience. And I think it's great to have all of those players involved in whether it's doing research or whether it's doing service design.
Yeah, I think the principles are the same, but the practice certainly in the UK isn't. I always look over at the research field with some jealousy that unless you're in mental health, I think there's a lot going on in mental health around lived experience, employing peer support workers and creating lived experience posts even. I'm working with Leicestershire Partnership Trust, who have employed 24 patient safety partners who are a step up from peer support workers. But in physical health, there ain't much. And I just look over at you research lot with some jealousy. Am I wrong to do that?
No, I don't think so. I think there's still a long way to go in the research sphere, don't get me wrong, but we're on the right track.
Why is it different? What's helped in the research field that isn't happening in the service design field? Is it austerity and
I guess, yeah, especially in the UK, I think austerity is a big issue, but that can also be in, you know, the research sphere as well. Budgets are constrained but I think research, there seems to be a real element now, like all research now has to show a pub involvement or an engagement element. And the funders want to see that. So, but then I think sometimes it can still be tokenistic. The funders want involvement, so they'll do the bare minimum, and it's not always actual representation, giving your lived experience. It's to tick the funding box rather than actual engagement and involvement. So there is work to still be done in the research sphere, but it's a really interesting question. So yeah, thank you to the person that put that forward.
There's Oluwafemi, do you have any thoughts about the difference between what goes on in research and service design in terms of engagement? Is that something you're aware of?
Okay, let me take it from this part. When I first started this, I didn't come in. I wasn't getting any remuneration, and this side we are not so used to that. But I think with time it should change, because we have different people. Some can do things without even thinking about, okay, I'm gonna get something from this, and others can't do anything without getting something from it. So I think in this part of the world, it's something we should look into and see how we can motivate or inspire people to be more engaged in patient partnership.
Very good. Yeah, I agree with all that. And it just suddenly struck me that the way the question has been framed, research versus service design. I write a patient leadership newsletter, and the next one's going to be about engagement or lack of it in policy. That in national policy in the UK, whenever NHS England have deigned to involve anyone, they'll run to one of 3 patient groups. And for me, that's, no offense, but that's a cartel. And there's a lack of lived experience voices in policy making. So, for instance, there's a review of the way the inspectorate works now, and they haven't yet talked to patients and the public, and they haven't yet, as far as I know, looked at how lay reviewers are working in the inspections. And there's such an opportunity for lived experience in policy, and yet the way we've framed that question, research versus service design, is that too far downstream? I wonder whether we can heighten our ambitions and let's look at how lived experience leadership can influence national policy and national work. Otherwise,
I think that's really important.
Yeah, go on, Libby.
Yeah, no, I'm just nodding along to everything you're saying, David, because I think, you know, that, especially in the UK, that, you know, leads on to everything. And I think that's, you know, the policy is where it starts. And if that's not changed, or that doesn't have the right inputs at the start, nothing's going to change further down the line.
Yeah, and I think there are ways to do it now. And just because it's difficult to do the engagement is not an excuse not to do it. It's a bit like, I tend to think, I'll have a prerogative of last word as chair, if you don't mind. We have at the moment, it's a bit like we have an organization that's supposed to be women-centered, run by men. We have an organization in the UK, the National Health Service, which is supposed to be patient-centered, which is not run by any patients. It's a bit like men running women's focus groups and getting women's surveys and having women-based experience design and women leadership, but actually no women in charge. And I think it's high time that people with lived experience were actually in charge. Thank you for being in charge and for being brilliant with the internet difficulties, with time differences, with me throwing questions at you, which were completely haphazard. Sorry to some of the people who didn't get their questions answered. I'll distribute where we can get further resources from everyone. I'm sure everyone has got further resources. And with that, I'll hand back to Ray.
Thank you so much to everyone on the panel here today for such an engaging conversation. I have been watching the comments as well too, and it's also wonderful to see such a highly engaged audience. I want to take an opportunity to thank you, David, and Libby, and Angie, and Oluwafemi for all of your thoughts here today. And I wanted to take a brief reminder to the audience here today to check out in the comments section at the bottom where you type in your comments, the part that says to, that there are different options, and just to make sure that when you do post comments, if you're looking to speak to everyone, to use the everyone option in the to section of your comments. And right now, what we're going to do is take a 30-minute break, and please do come back for our second session.